My toxic boss treats me and my coworkers like absolute garbage, ruling with an iron fist and always saying he's gonna fire us if we do even the smallest thing wrong. So I decided to get some revenge by exposing the fact that he owes hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt to various financial institutions that he was clearly trying to avoid. And I've honestly never been happier to see somebody get fired in my life. Here's what happened. To start things out, mobile phones became common in my country at around 2004, just as I finished high school. And my parents bought me my first phone, which was a second-hand Nokia. It was bulky and basic, but I promised myself that someday I'd buy a new phone with my own money. When college started, I had a 2-hour daily commute. In high school, I excelled academically and won several district-level awards. These awards were being distributed during my first year of college, and one nationalized bank award finally gave me enough money for a new phone. So I bought a Sony Ericsson K300i, and I also got a premium SIM card, not realizing that it had been abandoned by its previous owner. By the third day, I started receiving calls from a guy who we will call Brandon from various financial institutions. It turned out the number previously belonged to him, and for 20 years, I've been getting these calls. Determined to get my premium number, I began a routine of blocking wrong numbers. Back then, blocking was device specific, so each time I got a new phone, I had to start over and keep a list of numbers that I wanted to block. Fast forward and I got my first job after graduating in 2009. Around 2010, I was assigned to a new project with a notorious reputation for burning people out due to a nefarious project manager named Bran. I didn't know his full name for quite a while, but he took pride in making our lives a living nightmare. Bran ruled with an iron fist. From the moment his team stepped into the office, they were met with a barrage of emails and messages, each more important than the last. Bran thrived on creating chaos, often changing project deadlines on a whim, demanding his team work late into the night and through the weekends. Bran's presence loomed over every task. He insisted on micromanaging every single detail, and yet he was quick to take credit for any success, no matter how small it might be. But failures were met with his notorious tirades, publicly berating his team and assigning blame without hesitation. His unpredictable temper kept everybody on edge, afraid to make the slightest mistake. Meetings were another tool in his arsenal for torment. He scheduled them during lunch breaks and after hours, ensuring that no one could escape his grasp. These meetings were often pointless, serving only to reinforce his dominance and disrupt any semblance of work-life balance his team might have had. His relentless stream of emails continued around the clock, each carrying a thinly veiled threat: either be perfect or get dismissed. Under his reign, morale plummeted and burnout soared, yet Brand remained oblivious, satisfied only by his complete and total control. I was quite ashamed when I learned that he was from the same area that I was, and had gone to the same school even though it was years before me. In 2012, our company merged with a parent company. Almost nothing changed personnel-wise, but infrastructure-wise, we got Microsoft Outlook as well as an organization view. And that's when I first learned about Brand from an organizational hierarchy perspective. His full name was an absolute eye-opener. It was Brandon. Now, the name was common enough, but at the time, mobile numbers had an area-specific pattern, so I already knew that the previous owner of my number was from the same area as me. But still, it could be somebody else, so I needed to dig deeper. I talked with an old mentor who lived in the same area and had coached several high school students for the last 2 decades, and he confirmed my suspicions. I won't go into the details, but it was evidence that Brandon and Brand were the same person. I had been quite pissed off with this unknown person named Brandon for almost a decade by then, and Brand had been the bane of mine and my coworkers' existence for quite some time. So this is where my revenge takes place. First, I unblock all the numbers in my phone, as I was getting maybe 5 to 6 calls on a daily average. But after unblocking about 150 numbers, it suddenly increased to 15 to 18 people. And in that moment, my answering strategy changed drastically. Instead of saying, "Oh, this is the wrong number," I politely explained that the owner had changed his number and then provided his current number to update their database. And this is where I might be a jerk, because I also volunteered his manager's number, just in case he tries something else. Well, the fallout to my decision was epic. Apparently, these people had been trying to find him for almost a decade. Several banks had sold his debts to companies that literally bother people for a living to get their money back. And it turned out he had been taking loans in everybody else's names, namely his wife, his parents, his uncles, his aunts, and he was giving everyone that same number. He was evading credit card debt and loans of upwards $200,000. And apparently he had almost 20 cases filed against him, but nobody could ever find him, which is probably why he thought he could walk on water. There are multiple versions of what happened at the office when his manager started to get calls about him, but as a result, he was let go about 2 months later, and I'm so so happy to say that I never heard from him ever again. This is one of those situations where yes, revenge is oh so very sweet. This guy made your life a living nightmare in this office. He ruled with an iron fist, and he basically made everybody afraid that they were going to lose their job at the drop of a hat. Like seriously, that is so annoying, and I can't stand managers that act that way. But the really funny part here for me is that you had this guy's old number. You had the number that he used to try and get by on these stupid loans he was never going to pay back. Never mind the fact that he was opening loans in other people's names just so he could try to get some extra money for God knows what. Like that is so unethical and so toxic, it's not even funny. So good for you for taking this scumbag down, because from the sounds of it, this guy absolutely deserved it. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to AmITheJerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. My entitled sister-in-law is constantly putting her needs above everybody else's, as her entitlement has reached a breaking point in my mind that at this point I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, so my family had their annual dinner tonight. The youngest sister is an alcoholic, like straight up, so she doesn't have a car and always needs a ride. Last year, the eldest sister was her chauffeur and didn't get to visit with the family as long as she wanted to because her baby sister was whining that she wanted to go home. But this year, my husband said that he'll chauffeur his baby sister. We are all aging, and last year the eldest brother passed away, so you would think that the baby sister could deal with a few hours of family, but no, apparently that's just not possible. The second she's done eating, she's ready to leave. I said to her, you know you can't bully him into leaving like you do. So he told her to relax and let him finish eating. The next thing I know, she's asking the widow of the eldest brother to help her in the bathroom. And in that moment, I knew I should have followed, and I wish I had, because the alcoholic convinced the widow to let her use her phone. She then called a member of her church to come and give her a ride home. However, before that good Christian showed up, my husband was ready to leave. We're driving home when the eldest sister calls me to find out if she's with us, and that's when I find out the person from church is at the restaurant to pick her up. My husband then asked her, wait, what is going on? But of course, we get no answer. I then asked her why she would do that, and she actually tells me it's none of my business. I said, if you called someone from the church for a ride, why are you in our vehicle? Well, she just says, I want to go home. I'm not talking to you. So I said, good, then hear this. You are obnoxious in your entitlement, and I'm tired of you acting like a baby. You say things like, be my chauffeur, pay for my food, buy me drinks, let me finish your beer. And that's because if you don't get your way, you will just figure out who to manipulate next. Now, at about that time, we exit the interstate, and on the side of the road, there's a homeless woman yelling crazy. I then looked at my sister-in-law and said, look, there's your future. But I'm honestly still annoyed by my sister-in-law's attitude, as well as her demands to always get what she wants. Wow, I'm really surprised that anybody would drive this lady around. Like, for starters, she's not even a responsible adult. Like, not only is she an alcoholic, so she doesn't have a car, but while also getting rides from other people, she acts like she's so entitled to all this time and attention, as if anybody else's needs are not as important as hers. Like, that really must be obnoxious, and I'm just blown away that anybody's giving her the time of day. Like, if I was her brother of some kind and she's like, ooh, drive me around, and then she started acting up like that at some kind of like family get-together, I would lose my mind and not take that for a second. I would tell her straight up, you need to get an Uber because I am not taking care of you. And it's also so rude that she called somebody from church and said, hey, pick me up from the restaurant. And then when that person gets there, they're like, wait a second, where is she? She literally just inconvenienced someone to come out to a restaurant that they didn't need to go to, all because she wanted to leave right away. I want to leave right now. Like, that is absolutely obnoxious in my opinion. And I think the next time she wants to come for some kind of like annual get-together, she needs to find a ride from somebody else, because her awful behavior absolutely should not be rewarded. Am I the jerk for telling my mother-in-law that she should have tried to be a good mom if she wanted the rewards at her son's weddings? Because right now she is not happy with me, and at this point I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, so my brother-in-law, who is my husband's younger brother, had my husband and I act as parents of the groom at his wedding. My sister-in-law and my sister and my husband's children rounded out the groom's side at his wedding. Now, my mother-in-law and her husband and the children that she shares with her husband were there in person, but they were not counted among the immediate family, and they were not seated with us at any point. For reference, my husband became the father figure to his brother when their father died. My husband was 10 and his brother was 2 years old. My mother-in-law was pregnant with my sister-in-law at the time, and my husband became the head of the household. My mother-in-law basically checked out, and she would get angry at my husband for not doing better. The day my husband lost his father, he also lost his mother. She was and continues to be so cold to him. She expected so much of a 10-year-old and criticized him heavily in the years that followed. He was supposed to get amazing grades, keep the house in order, skateboarder, raise his siblings, help his mom out whenever she wanted, work when he was old enough, and needing to do so without ever complaining or turning to her for help. Well, his grades suffered immediately because of all that he went through. Until my husband turned 18 years old, he did 99% of the raising of his younger siblings, but they bonded with him in a very special way because of this. And I was his friend and then girlfriend at the time, so I helped as well. So they also bonded really well with me too. When my husband was 16 years old, his mom announced that she was pregnant and moved in this guy that she married in Vegas. And nobody knew anything about this beforehand. At that point, her and my husband's relationship worsened. Between my brother-in-law and sister-in-law not being bonded with her at all, and her trying to take back some parenting but them rejecting her, and my husband not caring to include his half-sibling in the parenting that he did, it all made for a very toxic mess. She wished that my husband wasn't alive. She wished that she never had him, and did this all in front of me and his siblings. When he moved out, she did all that she could to stop the siblings seeing each other, but my brother-in-law and sister-in-law acted out until she gave in. They had a lot of extended sleepovers with us, and my husband did attempt to win custody of them when we settled enough, but my mother-in-law's household was financially secure, so he was denied. But it never changed the fact that my brother and sister-in-law wanted us, but mostly they wanted him. They wanted the brother and father that they knew best of all. My mother-in-law and her family were not at mine and my husband's wedding, but as mentioned, she was at my brother-in-law's wedding because he and his sister maintained some contact. In the 2 weeks since the wedding, I ran into the mother-in-law at the grocery store, and that's where she confronted me. She complained about how unrewarding the wedding was when she was treated like she's not my brother-in-law's mom, and then she said it was my husband's fault. So I told her that she should have tried to be a good mom if she wanted any kind of reward at her son's weddings. And then after I said that, I walked right away. Because my husband and I have her blocked everywhere, she can't reach out to me, but she has been giving my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law a hard time over what I said. And she has called me a pot stirrer, as if I'm trying to stir up drama. So am I the jerk in this situation for what I said to my mother-in-law? What should I do? No, you are definitely not the jerk. Your mother-in-law sounds like a nightmare. She not only mistreated your husband, but also she practically checked out of being a parent. She pretty much forced her 10-year-old to raise his siblings all throughout their childhood. And then she brings in some guy that she married in Vegas, and then tries to be like, okay, I'm gonna be a parent again. It's like, no, that is not gonna happen. This is too little too late. And the fact that she's so blind to that and in denial that, yeah, she was an awful mother, that part alone is really upsetting in my opinion. Because she absolutely knows what she did. She knows that she practically abandoned her kids and forced her son to raise them in her stead. Like, that's on her, that's on nobody else. So for her to be like, wow, you guys didn't deserve that, this is your husband's fault, like that would have lit my hair on fire. I would be so mad if somebody said that about my spouse, especially considering what they went through in front of the person who caused it. So no, you are not the jerk, and honestly, I think your mother-in-law absolutely had this coming. An entitled Karen tries to block me from parking in a parking lot by standing in my way to try and flag her friend over. And even though I tried to explain that I'd been waiting over an hour for this parking spot, this entitled Karen refused to listen, claiming that she deserved this spot way more than I did. And I've honestly never been more frustrated with anybody in my life. Here's what happened. Okay, so this just happened, and the lady who did this is sat at a table not even 5 feet away from me at the moment. So for context, I'm currently looking for work, and I spend about 4 to 5 hours on most days at my local art center. They have a really nice coffee shop and serve food, and they have free parking as well. Today, I pulled in around 10 o'clock in the morning, and they had no spaces left, so I waited for almost an hour. Parking is 2 single lanes on either side, and I am perpendicular to one of them, patiently waiting and trying not to fall asleep. Other cars come in looking for spaces, but they see that I'm waiting and then they leave. So almost an hour in, some people walk out and indicate that I am parked in front of their car. It's a nice lady with her baby and some friends, so I back up and I patiently wait for them to load up so that I can take the space. As I am watching, I see another lady slowly saunter up towards the space, looking around and nodding her head, but not paying any attention to me. She is just beyond the parking space, and once the car pulls out, she walks into the space and turns her back to me just as I am trying to pull in. I say to her, "Excuse me, miss," and I say this twice, but she just completely ignores me. So I try again, just a little bit louder, but I still stay polite. She then turns to look at me, and I ask her to please move as I'm trying to pull in. At this point, she looks surprised and says, "No, I'm keeping this space." I then explain to her that I've been patiently waiting for almost an hour for the first available space. And when I said that, she then shows her entitlement. She said to me, "You've just been parked there. You were not waiting for the space." I explained to her that I have indeed been waiting and that I moved back to let the lady with the baby load up. I then see her friend drive up with their car and I recognized it. They have driven in twice while while I was waiting also looking for parking spaces. I tell her that I've seen her car twice and that they were looking for spaces as well, and that you can't just block a space, especially after I've been waiting for almost an hour. Now, it's important to note that I didn't raise my voice and I wasn't rude, but I also was not about to give in. She then gave me a look of disgust and walked towards her friend who was asking her if we were okay, so I then just decided to park my car. They then drove off and I came in. I found a table and said hello to a friend who was at an adjacent table, and I went to order my coffee. Now, I was going to tell the barista what had happened to me, but then I realized that they were in queue next to me, so I came to the internet instead. But either way, I'm still blown away by her entitlement, as well as the fact that she seriously tried to block my parking space. Okay, I will never understand anybody trying to block a parking space with their physical body. Here's the thing, if you don't have a car and you're not in a car, then you cannot claim a parking space for a car. You can't just run out and be like, oh, I'm taking this spot, sorry. Like, that is obnoxious and that makes you a massive piece of garbage. And the thing is, this lady absolutely knew that you were waiting for a parking space. She knew that's why you were sitting off on the corner literally waiting for an hour. They even circled the parking lot twice. Like, they definitely knew you were there, so any kind of like attitude they might have about you pulling into that spot, in my opinion, is completely unwarranted. But seriously, good for you for not giving into this moron, because her entitlement was absolutely unacceptable. I'm tired of all the customers that I have to deal with on a daily basis, as I am constantly confronted with so many awful people who come into my restaurant. Here's what happened. Okay, to start things out, I manage a fairly successful boardwalk beach restaurant on the East Coast, so naturally, this is our busy season. And I know the idea is that the more customers we have, the more likely problem customers are going to occur. I have been here for a few years, but my God, the customers we're getting this year is on a new level of unbelievable. For example, I got called racist because I wouldn't let an obviously underage person without an ID order a drink. Her friends just kept yelling that I'm racist over and over again, just to try and cause a scene. Eventually, the cops were called and I had them removed. Also, when it rains, it's an absolute nightmare. Everyone on the beach comes into our restaurant and just sits at the tables. Most of them don't order anything, and they just sit there waiting the rain out. And naturally, we get lots of people who actually want to sit and order, since they're here anyways and they might as well. On top of that, the people who requested to sit outside want to now come inside because they're now getting rained on. I get into arguments with people just sitting there because we need the tables for paying customers. Like, they just refuse to move. In fact, one time we had a family sit at the table, and one of them went out and brought back a pizza with drinks and started eating at our tables. Now, what was their explanation for this, you might be wondering? They claim this was a public space, so they're allowed to do this, and if I call the cops, then I'm breaking the law. And believe it or not, this is actually a very common occurrence. Now, it's also important to note that we don't allow public bathrooms, as those are only for paying customers. And the reason for this is that people from the beach will literally walk in and just trash the place. They'll drag sand into our restaurant, they'll mess up everything and get in the food, and just enter and basically destroy the toilet. And in most cases, they just clog it and then they leave. It's also a fairly small bathroom, which is typical of all the other restaurants that are trying to utilize space as much as we can. So, paying customers are stuck behind lines of non-paying customers waiting to use the bathroom. My favorite is when a non-paying customer comes up to me and says that the bathrooms are disgusting and that we should be ashamed of ourselves for allowing it to get like that. And this literally happens at least once a day. We try to keep up with it, but with how busy we get, sometimes I need bussers to bus tables or run food and not go over to check if the bathroom is clean after every single guest. There are huge public bathrooms 2 buildings down from us, and when we direct the non-paying customers there, they say they're already here and we're not allowed to deny someone to use the bathroom. Now, our state also has very strict open liquor laws. We cannot sell alcohol and allow a guest to bring it onto the boardwalk or the beach, and that's because we are the ones who would get in trouble for it. So, as you can probably guess, we had a guy who asked if he could bring his beer onto the boardwalk, but we just straight up told him no. We explained it's against the law and we point to the signs behind him that clearly say no alcohol beyond this point. He just says, oh, that's BS, you should have told me that before. But after we turn our backs, he just sneaks out of the restaurant. Eventually, the cops come back and they say that this guy, and yes, they described him perfectly, even down to what he was wearing, had told them that we had said he is allowed to bring drinks outside and that we had lied to him. We then pointed out the signs again to the cops and then said, yeah, that's what I thought, he just didn't want to pay the fine. I've also had customers bring his parking ticket in and hand it to me and told me that I have to pay it. He said that he was coming to my restaurant and that he didn't know that he had to pay for parking. But seriously, how is that my fault? Well, I just laughed and handed it back to him, which is probably not my most professional moment, and then he just started screaming and crying, demanding to speak to a manager. There are so many more instances besides this one, but honestly, sometimes customers can be the worst because they literally just don't care about anybody but themselves. Okay, just when I thought I've had some bad customer interactions, I then read this and I'm like, wow, you've had it way worse than me. I can't imagine working in one of those high traffic areas where this is like a tourist trap like the beach or an amusement park, because it seems to me it's just full of people who are super entitled, who also basically believe that they can get away with anything that they want. And this post is just a few glimpses into that. So truly, I'm sorry you have to deal with such awful customers, and hopefully your job gets better in the long run. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.